Previously on Zionistic Agitprop and Sentiment Part 1.
Well, you mentioned, we talked before about the Holocaust education program. It is about education. With 7,000 kids know nothing about the Holocaust, right?
That led us to this right here.
Look, I'm not even a religious Jew. I wasn't even bat mitzvahed. If anything like this had happened in the Black community, for example, 900 protesters left stranded on the tarmac in DC on their way to the rally because all the bus drivers walked out. If that had happened to any other marginalized community, this country would be in an uproar. But because it happened to the Jews, for some reason, it's laughable.
So naturally, that took us to this right here.
My theory is throughout history, Jews have always been industrious, they've been successful, resourceful, accomplished, and that threatens a lot of people. Like if you're not those things, you just become the subject of scapegoating and the source of other people's poverty, or the source of other, doesn't mean Jews control this, Jews control that. It's all
But it's
those
all
same.
bullshit.
Of course, it's bullshit, but it works. It's worked through the Crusades, the Spanish Inquisition, the Russian pogroms. Hitler ran to, he ran with it, and so I think it's just what it is. And you're 100% right.
Interesting.
Now, it wouldn't shock me a bit if a month from now you see students on Columbia's campus or Cornell or wherever, just somehow finding that lane that to them makes Hitler the good guy and somehow America in the 1940s the bad guy.
But also let's talk about Hitler for a minute. Did you see U.S.
Great name for that's a great name for a show, by the way, like a one-man show. Let's talk about Hitler.
Talk about it. Did you see U.S. and the Holocaust, the Ken Burns documentary? Everyone should watch it. It should be mandatory watching, especially for the Black community, if I may, because Hitler got his entire playbook from the Jim Crow South. The Nazis were watching how the Jim Crow South were treating slaves and said, oh, great call. Let's do that playbook. That's what we'll do to the Jews. Which is also why in the civil rights movement, the Jews were the ones that walked side by side with the Blacks to fight for their rights, because they know. And now the Black community isn't embracing us and saying we stand with you the way you stood with us. Jews died for their cause. Where's the history lesson in that? Who's teaching these kids? Because the fact that the entire Black community isn't standing with us, to me, says either they just don't know, or they've been brainwashed to hate Jews. But when you've been marginalized so much as a community, the way I feel we have, isn't that when you step up?
I think I think you're right. I think the brainwashing is that there's this narrative that's been created that Jews are the oppressor, Jews are genocidal.
When have we ever oppressed? Ever? You can use the argument for Israel.
Oh, wow. So, welcome back to the channel. This tactical intellectual channel here. This is part 2 of the Zionist Agitprop and Sentiment series right here of the scouting report. So you guys remember when this happened here?
Jamie Foxx is saying sorry. In a since deleted Instagram post, the actor shared a message on Friday that read, quote, "They killed this dude named Jesus. What do you think they'll do to you? Hashtag fake friends, hashtag fake love." The comments later sparked backlash, with some accusing his post of being anti-Semitic.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man? Bro, I'm out, man.
Not gonna lie, in real time, I was kind of perplexed, man, because to me, they just castrated this guy, figuratively speaking, right here. And then they actually got an apology out of Fox right there. And he should not have apologized, man. I don't care how they took it. They should have looked, used some knowledge, wisdom, and discernment, and just looked and see what he was referring to, man. I mean, all of this stupidity could have been avoided, but they wanted to make a power play and use him as an example right there. So it was just foolish to me. Like I say, these people, they overplay their hand because they're always accusing somebody of having the wrong intentions, especially when someone makes a statement. It could be an innocent statement, but they would turn it around and impute bad motives on another person. So that's basically a false accusation, and it comes in many different forms, like what Fox said. Fox was talking about a false friend, and then and then out of nowhere they're like, oh my god, that sounds anti-Semitic, you know. So they conflate. That's the power play right there. You conflate something innocent and really something that doesn't have anything to do with you. You include yourself into it, and then you impute bad motives on the person who said something. That's a false accusation. That's wrong, man. So how do you combat that false accusation right there? Well, you really go at them, you know, just like what the same sentiment of what Deuteronomy 19:18-19. You know, you have to, what it say, when someone accused you falsely, it says brother, but you know, these people, they're not our brothers. It says that you shall do to them as he had meant to do to his brother. You know, purge the evil from your midst, you know. So I don't advocate physical violence against some people. You hear that, YouTube? The person that's monitoring this video, I do not advocate physical violence. But what I do advocate is defending yourself. You know, defend yourself from that false accusation, the wrong motives that are imputed on you by somebody else. You know, someone else that did not do their due diligence and inquire of what you meant by whatever statement, you know. So I mean, you just have to go at them, you know. Stamp that wrong motives out. Turn it around on them, you know. Basically defend yourself. So now we have to expose hypocrisy with these folks, man. You know, to clear ourselves, you know, to defend ourselves, to speak up for ourselves. So we're gonna check out this video right here regarding the ADL, and you know, let's see what they talk about, and you know, let's uncover stuff. Let's uncover some things that's actually happening with them. You know, so Juliana Margulies, she want to talk about knowing one's history and being educated, you know, via history. So we're gonna do some educating right here, and this goes out to our people right here. You know, we all need to be aware of this stuff. Okay, so let's go into the video.
There's no doubt that anti-Semitism is on the rise. From the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, where white supremacists chanted "Jews will not replace us," to the emergence of the Great Replacement theory, Jewish people are once again finding themselves being scapegoated for the problems of an empire in crisis. Now, you might think that the rise of openly fascist movements around the world would be of the highest concern to groups fighting anti-Jewish hate. But at the Anti-Defamation League's annual conference on anti-Semitism, there was only one subject up for discussion: how to crush the movement for the liberation of Palestine. For over a century, the Anti-Defamation League has cultivated its reputation as the premier organization dealing with matters of anti-Semitism, and is almost always brought in to judge its alleged incidents. In one analysis, researchers found that the ADL was mentioned in 2/3 of 46,000 articles mentioning white nationalism from 2018 to 2019. Despite the ADL's reputation in the media as an infallible anti-racist organization, the ADL has long been accused of selectively deploying accusations of anti-Semitism and being purveyors of anti-Black and anti-Palestinian racism themselves.
Now, that definitely sounds like what Juliana Margulies did. She's very selective you notice in the interview, she was just like talking about something then out of left field. She was like, yeah, let's veer back over to the black people. Let's start talking about black people again. They need to blah, 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 and so on and so forth. That's exactly what the ADL does, because they're nothing but a propaganda arm, you know, stir up dust, try to make a power play against certain groups of people. And, you know, overall, they just want to flex on people and style on people and push their weight around, you know. But let's proceed with the next point in the same video, that is.
And that's exactly what I saw at the ADL's annual anti-Semitism conference, Never Is Now, held in New York City. The conference began with a few speeches speaking generally about the evils of anti-Semitism, but within a half hour or so, the conference moved on to the real issue at hand. Under the guise of morphing threats of anti-Semitism, ADL CEO Jonathan Greenblatt began laying out a picture of a world fully gripped by the forces of anti-Semitism. A world where, wait for it, Ben & Jerry's would no longer sell ice cream to Israeli settlers.
Brands like Ben & Jerry's, who knew when they announced that they would not sell ice cream in the West Bank, it effectively would end their presence in all of Israel.
Again, this is nothing but a propaganda arm of basically an ethno-state, you know, that shall continue to enjoy and indulge in the Wilson Fisk treatment. Those who saw Daredevil season 1 on Netflix, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, you guys already know, but this right here, they just flexing their muscles right here. So let's go ahead and move on to the next point. It gets really good after this, so let's go ahead and get into that part.
If you're scratching your head right now, I don't really blame you. When most people think of the morphing threat of anti-Semitism, they're usually not talking about Cherry Garcia. So what does this have to do with anti-Semitism? Well, it all comes down to how you define anti-Semitism. Most people would say anti-Semitism is the hatred of Jewish people. This would include acts of violence, threats, slurs, and racist tropes. But for decades, the ADL has desperately tried to attach another article onto the definition of anti-Semitism: criticism of the State of Israel. Ben & Jerry's, according to the ADL, is anti-Semitic because they took up a call from Palestinians to boycott Israel for its human rights abuses. In fact, the entire focus of the conference was not identifying or confronting far-right groups and ideologies, but instead legitimizing this pro-Israel definition of anti-Semitism. Nearly half the panels scheduled for that day were explicitly about equating criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. The first panel I went to was called New Tactics in Anti-Semitism, and I thought maybe this has something to do with the rise of the far right. Nope. This entire panel was dedicated to attacking a website called the Mapping Project, a website which tracks ties that different Massachusetts institutions have to Israel. Now, even though nothing on the website is factually untrue, the panel felt so threatened by the website that one of the panelists actually said that the concept behind the Mapping Project was the exact same as the Tree of Life synagogue shooting, which was the deadliest anti-Semitic attack in U.S. history.
The Mapping Project, and I'm going to be blunt, is the same underlying conspiracy theory as the man who murdered 11 Jews in Pittsburgh.
So it's good that he prefaced all of that with, hey, it depends on how you define it, because to me, the modern definition or usage of it is 100% a misnomer. Why do I say that? Well, when you look at the definition of what it means to be Semitic or Shemitic, you know, it's it includes Amharic, and we know that's spoken by certain Ethiopians right there, Akkadian, even Arabic. So you remember back in the day, and I comment on YouTube all the time when this subject is brought up. It's like Ilhan Omar. I mean, she's definitely Shemitic. She speaks Arabic, right? So, I mean, that's her family lineage, right? Arab. So when she speaks out, that's inter-group complaints right there. That's a inter-group quarrel right there, or different branches of it. But she got that label, and she is one. And it's ironic because, you know, the convergence, you know, we converted from this person then went and we converted to, you know, the misnomer. Read between the lines, man. But anyway, I have the definition of it right there. I have the groups right there. So let's make one more point, how the ADL is trying to convert the definition of critique or disagreement into hatred of. So, I mean, that's definitely malicious right there, and bearing false witness to whoever you want to direct it towards. We already know that's a no-no, but they don't care. That's secular anyway. So let's move forward.
The shooter, Robert Gregory Bowers, was a hardened neo-Nazi who obsessively posted about a made-up Jewish plot to flood white countries with immigrants. While the panel about the mapping project went on for about an hour, there was not a single mention of white supremacist groups on a panel called New Tactics in Anti-Semitism. The next panel I went to was dedicated solely to whether or not criticism of Israel can be differentiated from anti-Semitism. On this panel, the moderator came up with all kinds of scenarios where the panelists were supposed to decide whether certain criticisms of Israel were anti-Semitic or legitimate. So, is it possible to not be anti-Semitic while criticizing Israel? Apparently not. Every single scenario presented to the panelists was called anti-Semitic. And while I could go through each of the different scenarios, the most memorable was that opposing weapons transfers to Israel was anti-Semitic because...
What do these people want? More dead Jews?
I'm sure to most of you it's clear that this is ridiculous, but part of the problem is that this conference was explicitly targeted at middle school and high school students who got in for free.
Our goal is to prepare our children before they ever get to the college campus on how to deal with anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism.
No, Mr. Greenblatt, your goal is to theorize, create suppositions, employ logical fallacies, misconstrue words and meanings and stuff. And that's conflation right there. You conflate things erroneously. I mean, none of this is in good faith right there. So the people that take in those erroneous teachings right there, they will start to, I guess, adopt suppositions. And I mean, it's all confusion, man. That's the goal of it right there. It's all confusion. So what else do they have for us?
In practice, this meant that you had incredibly young people who are highly impressionable hearing this completely biased definition of anti-Semitism from people they saw as absolute authorities. One of the biggest issues in the ADL's eyes was that certain unnamed marginalized groups have allegedly become the biggest purveyors of anti-Semitism.
Certain marginalized groups seem to be some of the biggest offenders of anti-Semitism. People don't want to talk about that.
And what's really sad is that so many other minority groups have joined this bandwagon, that a lot of the national anti-Israel organizations have made it their cause for the last 20 years to equate the Palestinian problem with the problems of racism in this country. It is not a racial conflict. And those kinds of equations are just stupid, right, and they don't belong on campus.
The implication that black people are somehow the face of anti-Semitism has been a consistent theme throughout the history of the ADL. In 2019, the ADL smeared Ilhan Omar as an anti-Semite for tweeting out that the American Israel Political Affairs Committee donating to politicians might have an impact on their positions on Israel. In 2018, the ADL led a campaign against then CNN commentator Mark Lamont Hill for saying, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," which the ADL said was a coded message that secretly meant that Hill wanted to destroy the state of Israel. The ADL campaign got Hill fired from CNN. Going back to the 1980s, the ADL blocked anti-racist school curricula prepared by the National Anti-Klan Network because they deemed it too radical. And in 1967, the ADL compared the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee to a black version of the KKK because of its support for Palestine. To this day, the ADL still conditions its support for black liberation movements on whether or not they support Israel. In 2016, the ADL denounced the Black Lives Matter movement after BLM released a policy platform criticizing Israel. Despite releasing multiple statements condemning the murder of George Floyd, the ADL will never tell you that they're one of the largest non-governmental sponsors of police exchanges between the United States and Israel, where repressive policing tactics are exchanged. So it really comes as no surprise that there's been a historically instinctive solidarity between anti-racist and Palestinian protesters facing off against tear gas and repression. Historically, white Europeans have always been the main purveyors of anti-Semitism, not black people. But for an organization hell-bent on blurring the connection between the Palestinian struggle and the struggle of other oppressed nationalities, the long history of black Palestinian solidarity constitutes a tremendous threat.
So as you can see for yourself, they craftily and skillfully tell lies, man. You see how they just insert that, oh, certain unnamed groups, they anti-Semitic, blah, 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 blah. They became the face of it. And then when you delve deeper and try to find verification or information on what they're speaking of, then you see the picture come into full view that they're talking about the melanated group of people. They're trying to orchestrate things and manufacture things so that the melanated man and even the melanated woman will be the face of this anti-Semitic claim that they like to throw around. And we seen that a couple years back. We seen that this year, you know, it's 2024. We seen that in 2023 with regularity. I mean, we seen that with many entertainers. I'm not even gonna name them. You already know. We seen them with entertainers where they would say something and then they would apologize later. And even, I'm gonna just mention one, Jamie Foxx. He said something that had nothing to do with those people. The idea behind it wasn't even speaking on those people, you know, and then he ended up apologizing because they, you know, a mountain of, it was just a bad situation, man. They just came after the guy, man. So they want to put you into that mind frame right there. So, but as it always turns out to be true, nobody is infallible, man. Like, just like in the classroom setting right there, that snitch or the teacher's pet, they always do some dirt themselves, man. So like they always snitching on you, but they up there like selling weed in the bathroom or something, or you know, they doing the most dirt. I'm gonna just say that right there. So when you uncover the layers of the onion, you see what they do. So they've been very anti, in quotes, black, B-L-A-C-K, or in this country they say African American, black. I'm just gonna say melanated people. They've been very anti our people. So, and they you know, the ADL has a long, pretty impressive, extensive history when it comes to that, man. Like, things that are meant to benefit us, they are opposed to. So you seen the example of it right there. Like, there was an anti-Klan group formed, and then the ADL, they were against it because they thought it was too radical. But then they want to label us anti whatever. So really what this boils down to is that they look at us as a group of melanated people, you know, the group that's been pimped out by everybody else. And they see, okay, those pawns right there, we don't want them to be pawns of that group right there. So let's yada yada yada. And we see that happening right now. But we definitely have to recognize it and get ourselves out of this position of being a pawn for other groups, being pimped out to other groups. So let's move on.
This strong support for Palestine among oppressed nationalities is also why there's so many white nationalists who, despite their vicious anti-Semitism, support Israel. Richard Spencer, who famously sig-heiled Trump's 2016 presidential victory, is actually an outspoken supporter of Israel. Why? Because, in his own words, Israel resembles the type of white-only ethno-state he wants to create in the U.S. Israel is a two-tiered legal system, one set of rule for Jews and another for Arabs. Israel has Jewish-only roads and Jewish-only schools. Jews have one type of ID while Arabs have another. Israelis are free to travel anywhere in Palestine, whereas Arabs are forced to apply for travel permits and endure brutal and humiliating checkpoints. The legal system also fosters a deeply racist mentality towards Arabs. Polls show that about half of Israeli high schoolers don't think Arabs should have the right to vote. Another poll showed that almost half of Israeli Jews don't want Arabs teaching their kids. It's basically an Israeli version of Jim Crow. After publishing a video titled 10 Reasons I Hate the Jews, Gavin McInnes, founder of the Proud Boys, declared that he likes Israel as, quote, more than a friend, and that they should stop apologizing for everything, like their immigration policy. Israel's immigration policy towards non-Jews is incredibly harsh, especially towards Africans. In 2015, Israel passed a law that would require non-Jewish African migrants to either leave Israel or go to prison. And Israeli politicians often liken African migrants to a cancer on Israeli society. Even Jonathan Greenblatt himself, for all the lip service he gives about opposing Trump's racism, was happy to accept the Trump administration's invitation to see the U.S. Embassy to Israel move from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. White supremacists correctly see Israel as a racist Jewish supremacist state. They celebrate the European colonization of Palestine for the same reason they celebrate Europe's conquest of the Americas. And they admire the way the state of Israel has made the indigenous Arabs a subjugated class on their own land. But for the ADL, supporting a country admired by white supremacists for being a model ethno-state is apparently not a contradiction.
Yeah, hey, I saw the same thing. I've heard the same thing. And I agree. Hey, it's bad, man. They don't even try to hide it, man. Well, some of them do, but I mean, the ADL is just terrible, man. They so biased, man, and you know, the vibes they give is like, yo, yeah, what you gonna do about it? I'm biased, and you know, I mean, good grief. Yeah, it's so glaring that you have known white supremacist people and even organizations saying, you know what? We really like what Israel is doing, you know. We love how we love their immigration practices and everything, and who they allow in, and we like that two-tiered system right there that they have. You know, America should do that. That's what they're thinking right there. So you know, you can't tell me that. You know what? I'm gonna just let the video speak because I don't want to get demonetized. Well, I don't want to get my channel terminated. So I'll let the video play.
Likewise, Israel's consistent support for white supremacist ethno-states also didn't seem to register as a cause for concern for the self-proclaimed anti-Semitism watchdog. Israel was one of the few countries in the world to recognize the legitimacy of apartheid South Africa. Initially, Israel was hostile towards South Africa because so many leading figures in the South African government supported the Nazis. But it eventually got over it as Israel realized that it had far more in common with South Africa as a fellow apartheid state than they had differences. The two countries signed a secret agreement in 1975 to exchange weapons when both countries were under international arms embargoes for their violations of international law. While Israel went to great lengths to try to cover up this relationship, recently uncovered documents indicate that Israel offered to sell apartheid South Africa nuclear weapons. It's widely believed that the 1979 Vila incident, where U.S. satellites detected an explosion off of South Africa's coast, was actually a joint Israeli-South African nuclear weapons test. While the U.S. government's official story was that the explosion was possibly a meteorite hitting the Earth, several nuclear scientists and U.S. intelligence agents said the commission investigating the explosion was set up to arrive at a non-nuclear explanation so the U.S. wouldn't have to sanction Israel for violating the Limited Test Ban Treaty. Israel also played a major role in arming Rhodesia, the name of a British settler colony and apartheid state that occupied present-day Zimbabwe. While Israel publicly condemned Rhodesia, privately, Israel was pouring weapons into Rhodesia in a desperate attempt to prop up the apartheid regime, which, like South Africa, couldn't buy weapons due to international sanctions. Israel gave Rhodesia the license to manufacture the infamous Israeli Uzi submachine gun, which Rhodesians renamed the Ruzi, and exclusively sold it to its white citizens. Israel also used private companies to hide sales of Bell 205 helicopters to Rhodesia, using apartheid South Africa as a supply route. These helicopters, which were being converted into gunships, were the single most important weapon in the Rhodesian government's war against African liberation fighters, and it was Israel who helped them acquire them. Today, Israel still helps give cover to white supremacists outside of its own territory. In December, Israel welcomed a delegation from the Ukrainian Azov Battalion, a special forces detachment in the Ukrainian military most known for its support for Nazism. The insignia of the Azov Battalion is the Wolfsangel, an ancient European symbol most notably appropriated by the Nazis. Several divisions of the Waffen-SS used the Wolfsangel as their logo. An earlier version of the Azov logo featured an even more overtly white supremacist symbol, the Sonnenrad, or Black Sun. The Sonnenrad was also appropriated and used by Nazis, and today is a symbol widely used by neo-Nazi groups. Peyton Gendron, the white supremacist murderer who carried out a mass shooting targeting black people in Buffalo, New York, wore this symbol in a photo he took of himself while wearing a tactical vest. The symbol also appeared on the cover of the Christchurch Shooters Manifesto, titled The Great Replacement. Ironically, both of these symbols are identified as anti-Semitic hate symbols on the ADL's website. Despite the fact that you can find dozens of images online of members of the Azov Battalion waving swastikas and throwing up the Sieg Heil salute, Israeli politicians and soldiers happily met with these anti-Semites. Since the war in Ukraine began, Western governments and media outlets have been working overtime to downplay the Azov Battalion's clear ties to Nazism. Instead of condemning the Western media's attempt to whitewash the Azov Battalion, the ADL obediently followed this trend by rewriting its own understanding of the battalion. Until recently, the ADL correctly recognized Azov's far-right tendencies and wrote a report that included details of its ties to fascist groups in America. But in December, the ADL responded to a hate incident reported by the Gray Zone to the ADL, in which a member of the Azov Battalion who donned the supremacist Sonnenrad tattoo was hosted and honored at a Pentagon-funded sports competition. Instead of condemning the competition for hosting a Nazi, the ADL responded 60 days after the inquiry, saying that the Azov Battalion was actually no longer an anti-Semitic organization. Try telling that to the Azov guy with a Nazi tattoo. Anti-war activists have repeatedly warned that heavy weapons sent to Ukraine would inevitably end up in the hands of far-right groups like the Azov Battalion. In fact, there's a video of a Ukrainian neo-Nazi group, C-14, bragging about how they'd siphon off many of the weapons sent to Ukraine by Western countries.
Уявіть собі, скільки в нас зброї, скільки в нас ветеранів. А це є, вже йдеться про те, що нові політичні альянси вже глобального рівня, нові політичні виклики.
According to the ADL's own website, the Azov Battalion hosts white supremacist groups from around the world, including the United States, so they can fight in the Donbass, gain combat experience, and take it home with them. You can find tons of articles online documenting this connection, and even the US government, which has been the biggest military backer of Ukraine, was concerned about white supremacists in the US traveling to Ukraine to connect with white supremacists there. Despite all of the evidence of neo-Nazis treating Ukraine like an international training ground, the ADL invited a speaker from Ukraine to their conference to ask the attendees to pressure Washington to send even more weapons to Ukraine. You gotta ask yourself if it's actually beneficial to young Jews to scaremonger about this fake threat of Palestinians when there's very real anti-Semitism out there. But it's clear that this completely warped view of anti-Semitism is no accident. The ADL wants Jews to believe that the biggest threats to Jewish people are the ice cream boycott and the proliferation of Levantine history. Because if they actually had to criticize all anti-Semitism, white nationalism, and Nazism, they'd have to criticize Israel and all of its racist allies. The fact of the matter is, the ADL is nothing more than a well-funded PR campaign for a rogue apartheid state that's lost all international legitimacy. The increasingly desperate rhetoric coming from the ADL reflects an increasingly desperate situation for a country trying to maintain colonialism in a world that will no longer accept it.
That was very deep right there, and very hypocritical of that country, Israel. So they like to pontificate all this other stuff and have their chest out and speak with bluster regarding other people. But like I say, they do their own dirt. They have a bunch of Nazi-ish allies and white supremacist allies with them that they work with and that they had worked with in the past. It's kind of funny that South Africa had that apartheid state going on, and they had, I guess, Nazi sympathizers, and eventually Israel, they got over that sentiment that they, felt before, and then started to ally with apartheid South Africa and Rhodesia You can't make this stuff up, man. But then they want to villainize and demonize and try to make the original man, the original people of this world, to be the face of, I guess, their plight. And it's easy to see, man, but I like what he said at the end, man, about the rogue ethno state. So to end this video, I'm just gonna play a clip again from the clown Juliana Margulies and what she said. Now, having all this information at your disposal, and you see and hear what was played in his presentation here, let's listen to what she had to say about this topic.
Talk about it. Did you see U.S. and the Holocaust, the Ken Burns documentary? Everyone should watch it. It should be mandatory watching, especially for the Black community, if I may, because Hitler got his entire playbook from the Jim Crow South. The Nazis were watching how the Jim Crow South were treating slaves and said, oh, great call. Let's do that playbook. That's what we'll do to the Jews. Which is also why in the civil rights movement, the Jews were the ones that walked side by side with the Blacks to fight for their rights because they know. And now the Black community isn't embracing us and saying we stand with you the way you stood with us. Jews died for their cause. Where's the history lesson in that? Who's teaching these kids? Because the fact that the entire Black community isn't standing with us, to me, says either they just don't know, or they've been brainwashed to hate Jews. But when you've been marginalized so much as a community, the way I feel we have, isn't that when you step up? So
well, I think I think you're right. I think the brainwashing is that there's this narrative that's been created that Jews are the oppressor, Jews are genocidal.
When have we ever oppressed?
I guess Margulies forgot that Israel stood side by side with apartheid South Africa and apartheid Rhodesia also, and that's just what we know. So really, I know I said that I was gonna close it out, but I just had to comment on that part right there. I'm gonna play one more clip and then close it out. Also give quick commentary on it and then close it out.
Okay, it feels important to say this. I am not pulling my perspective on Israel-Palestine out of my ass, okay? I'm not just guessing that Israel is committing a genocide against Palestine. I have studied and researched this. I have bona fides, and I will share them. First of all, I'm a Jewish woman. I was raised by a Zionist family. My grandfather was a Holocaust survivor. My family talks about our spirit of resistance and resilience constantly. Desiring goodness from the nation of Israel is in my blood, and still, I can see that the Zionist state is vicious, violent, and evil. If someone who is raised by a Zionist family, by people who believe that Israel has the right to exist and that it is our salvation, if I can overcome my pro-Israel bias and learn about this conflict, so can you. And frankly, I should not be calling it a conflict, it's a genocide. So when I was in college, around 2012, 2013, a bunch of my friends and loved ones started going on birthright trips. And I knew enough then to ask the question when they got back from their birthright trips, what about Palestine? And when these people I love, admire, and respect started talking about Palestinians and using language like terrorists, I knew I had to learn more. I also knew that I wanted to go on birthright, and I was nervous about being brainwashed by the trip, and I should have been nervous. So before I went on birthright, I decided at my small liberal arts school in Massachusetts to get a well-rounded perspective, educational perspective on Israeli-Palestinian politics. I took 4 courses: Suffering and Evil in the Jewish Tradition, The Jewish Experience, Middle East Politics, and Arab-Israeli Conflict. I also took international and comparative politics courses that often brought up Israel and Palestine in comparisons to, for example, apartheid South Africa. And by the time I finished my ample coursework on the subject before I went on birthright, I was already pro-Palestine. Because once you are in the literature, once you are in the research, not the media stories about this, not the pro-Zionist rigmarole on CNN and MSNBC, once you are in the literature and the data, this isn't a debate. This isn't a question. People talk about Israel-Palestine like it is incredibly complicated, and I reject that premise. It is not. We know that anti-Semitism exists globally, right? We know that Jews are not the most beloved population in the world. We know that Britain has a colonial history and they have taken on colonial projects even through the 20th and 21st centuries. Essentially, Britain already wanted to colonize Palestine. So did the United States. And at the end of World War II, Britain and the US got to talking and they thought, who do we want to exploit for military labor someplace that is surrounded by brown people so that we can rape and pillage land that we don't currently have access to? Where's one part of the globe we haven't effectively colonized yet? And there was Palestine. And Britain had been trying to colonize Palestine already. And so this was passed off to Jews who had just survived the Holocaust as a gift. Here we're granting you this parcel of land so that you and your progeny can exist in peace and not be violated anymore. Congratulations. Except that land already belonged to someone. Palestinians were already living there. And the US and Britain didn't give a shit about the well-being of Jews. They didn't care. This wasn't a gift for Jews. This was always intended to be a trap of, you do our military labor for us. We'll put you here and we'll grant you this parcel of land that already belongs to someone, that there are already people on. And in return, you will rape and pillage that land for us and we'll just all share in the wealth. And it might be a good idea too if like your entire population were to, have conscripted military service so you can really defend that land that is yours, totally yours, bucko. And if you see who has emerged as the political leadership of Israel over the last few generations, this won't surprise you. This insidiousness will not surprise you. This is how you get Benjamin Netanyahu, someone who absolutely agrees to the premise of Israel as a Zionist ethno-nationalist state, who says, we are here for one thing and one thing only, is to garner as much wealth from this earth that we have, as much tourist property from this plot of land, convert it to dollars, and build up a military so mighty, a military apparatus so great that we wind up producing the world's weaponry. Yes, we have mined this land, and we have used the land to give you war machinery so that we can all murder each other 1,000 times over. And to the people already living here, well, we'll murder them too. I took basically a semester and a half of college courses on this, and I know in my bones that what Israel is doing right now is a genocide. It's evil. What they've been doing for the last 75 years is a genocide. It is drip violence, slow violence, protracted harm. It is meant to exhaust the civilian population of Palestine. It is meant to exhaust all Palestinians out of their will to fight. And all the benefit, the wealth garnered from that land goes to the primary stakeholders, not the Palestinian people to whom the land originally belonged.
So it's definitely very important to have a grasp on history, 1948, and the things that happened previously that led up to the creation of this ethno-state right here. So you have to know the major players. I mean, you don't have to know, but it's good to know because, I mean, like I say, it's a matter of time before they was gonna move on us too. You had, I guess, the Palestinian people there. Then Britain, they had their own thing, their mindset regarding colonialism. And you already know the U.S. The U.S. is the U.S. Nothing new there. Well, to some people, I mean, for those who were born in the year 2000 in the U.S., I mean, they have a different mentality, man. They're colorblind. But I don't know why, but what this lady was saying, I mean, hey, look into it, folks. Look into it, because they're gonna bring that sentiment here, and they're already starting to. All these propaganda arms that the state of Israel have over here, they're moving on to us as a people, and we're still disorganized, disheveled. We're definitely an easy target or easy targets, and if what she says doesn't move you, well, just check out this next clip right here. There they go, attacking their own people, the ones who have the courage to stand up. Even in that part of the world, that country right there, they get attacked by their own people. So, I mean, what you think they'd do to us if they were over here? They already showed you the example via the Palestinian people over there, but say if they were over here, you know, they look like some SS guards walking around, beating people down. So I'm just making an observation, like Amazing Lucas says. And you know, to give credit where credit's due, this video right here, I've seen this on Professor Black's channel right there when he was giving his presentation. Yeah, I mean, I was a mad dash to search that video right there, so finally got it. So I have to definitely give credit where credit's due. And every video that I had in this presentation, this video, whatever you want to call it, the links will be in the description, so you can go and check out the original link or original video. The main aim of this presentation or video is to increase the discernment of our people, because other groups are levying charges against us that are very, very false. So we just want to reiterate that this is not anti-Semitic, this is not hateful or hate speech or anything. We just calling it like it is, and we have a right to do that. So, you know, we have to show the hypocrisy, we have to show the bad logic and the logical fallacies being employed from many angles toward our people. This is education here. Thanks for tuning in. See you guys later. Everybody be safe out there.